Hey you guys, I'm going to show you some of the flat lay tips that I use at a real wedding. So the first few things to consider are first lighting, and then second what you have to work with. So as far as lighting goes, I'm here in one of my boudoir studios. So this wall was literally built for this massive window. So in my case, these photos are going to be very bright and evenly lit. I have a little bit of a shadow going on, but it's, I think, an appropriate amount. If I were in a situation where the light was too harsh from one side, I would need to put a reflector on the other side. So something like an actual reflector or a white pillowcase or something like that right here, so the light would bounce against it and then bounce back onto the subject. Typically at a real wedding, I find the biggest, best window I can, which is usually on the floor at somebody's somewhere like the hotel room or even in the venue or something like that. So the second thing to consider is the subject matter, like what the bride and groom have actually given you to work with. Sometimes you don't have a nice invitation suite. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it all looks good except for one piece of the invitation suite, that type of thing. So your job as a photographer is to document and tell the story of what the bride and groom have in their wedding day. So you do need to photograph each piece, even if it's not high end. But you also don't necessarily need to show that off. So for example, instead of fancy shoes, maybe they give you tennis shoes or Converse or something like that. That's not necessarily something you have to put on your blog or Instagram about, right? So in those cases, take the picture with the piece that they give you, maybe take it out really fast and get a different picture that you can feature in your social media. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk through each of these different steps and photograph different pieces here. I do have a really lovely invitation suite here today. What I don't have that you normally would have on a wedding day is a veil. So sometimes if I don't have my flat lay board at a wedding, I'll take the veil and put it out on the ground just to kind of soften the pattern of the carpet or whatever is there in front of me. So this is what we're going to do. Typically I start with the main pieces of the invitation suite. In this case, the main pieces are the actual invitation itself and this beautiful envelope that has a really pretty pattern on it. So I'm going to set these up, move these flowers out of the way. And when you're doing an invitation suite, you can do a very geometric option. You can kind of have them off-centered or lined up, but the idea is that everything has straight edges, so you're not doing this kind of thing. Straight edges. If you're doing that, make sure they are perfectly straight because little changes will make a big difference in the end photo. In this case, I'm going to purposely angle things on top of each other at a kind of a curve, just so that we don't have to worry about it being a little bit off. So I have a handful of pieces here. I'm going to use this kind of sheer invitation sleeve as a backdrop for one of the other pieces. And I'm just overlapping things in a way that I like. I also have this kind of pink sleeve. I'm going to use that to help this next piece kind of stand out from the background. That's lovely. The whole idea here is that we're kind of centering all of the action around the important pieces. Now, I have these risers, and I'm going to use this riser under my main piece. Everything is going to be in focus when I photograph this, so it's not like bringing it closer to the camera will make a difference really on what is in focus, but it will lift it so that there's a soft drop shadow around the outside, and that just pulls it a little bit apart because we have a lot of texture going on, so that pulls it a little bit apart from the rest of the things. Okay, so then I have rings. I'm using my own rings today, and I have a ring box and a ring, like a little ceramic dish. In this case, I think I'm going to use the dish. I just like the look of that for this. And I'll leave my actual diamonds, like my engagement ring, there, and I'm going to put my other two wedding bands just down kind of on the ground next to it. Okay, so the next big thing that I have are these shoes. And again, if the shoes weren't pretty, we would not emphasize them. We would not want to show that off. But I'm just going to put them kind of in the corner so they kind of show up there. And then the next thing that we need to show off is her jewelry. I'm kind of check marking in my mind all of these pieces that she has put effort into, all of her styling aspects. And again, sometimes I don't include everything if it's not pretty. But then in other cases, sometimes I do include more than what I normally would. So like if the grandmother's handkerchief is there, or sometimes I have brides who wear their wedding rings and then they have grandma's wedding ring on her other hand. Sometimes I include that extra ring in the big flat light picture. And I start with the large photo first, so that if I'm in a rush and that's the only thing I get to photograph, everything was included. So I start big, start with everything here, get the full picture, and then I get up close and shoot different little aspects of things. Okay, so at this point I have all of the important things that the bride, quote unquote, in this situation that the bride has given me, and now I need to add, just like level it up a little bit. So a few things I'm thinking about. I have this subject matter here, so I have all of the important things here. Now I can add either lines or dots. And there are a few ways we can do each of those. Basically, the purpose of lines is to draw your attention to a specific place. So we could do lines with the edge of the invitation suites, like we talked about, having it very geometrical. We could do lines with this ribbon. Excuse me. We could put ribbon in here and like drape it around and bring our eye to a certain place if we wanted to. Honestly, I feel like this ribbon is going to be kind of busy, so I'll probably just drape it down here in the corner, but I don't think I'm going to actually put it through the whole image. It'll be more of just a filler kind of in the corner. If I did want to put it through the whole piece, I would have to lift things up and put it underneath and drape it. The ribbon takes the longest of everything in a flat lay. The ribbon takes forever. Then when it comes to, and also we could use like this tall stemmed rose could be a really lovely line, and honestly I think that could be beautiful. So you can use lines in lots of different ways, but basically the whole purpose is to give a little more structure into the image so that we know what we're looking at. And then we have dots. Dots are meant mostly just to fill the space so it doesn't feel empty. So we can use dots by using like little wax stamps. We can use my rings as dots because I put them out on the floor, and they are just little like polka dots. We also can use flower petals and things like that. In this case, I think using a few of these flowers and just kind of draping them around here, just filling in the emptiness, is going to look really pretty. So that's what I'm going to be working on right here. I have these little risers that lift the flower up so that instead of tipping over, it looks straight at the camera. So that's what I'm putting together here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to take a few pictures. And I usually get to this point and then I look through the camera and see what I'm missing and see if there's anything that I'm like, oh, there's a big empty space there, or this is too busy, or these are overlapping a little too much, or things like that. But honestly, at this point, it looks good. Something else to keep in mind, if you photograph straight down, everything will be proportionally correct. But if you photograph from an angle, so straight down, everything's good. But if you photograph from an angle, proportions are not going to look correct. So that's something to watch for so that you don't have to fix that. Sometimes you can't fix it, but sometimes you can change your proportions in editing. Okay, so then from here, everything is put together. If I'm in a hurry on the wedding day, the next thing that I will do is just take detailed pictures of each of these things and be done. In this case, I'm not necessarily in a hurry to get off to the next part of the wedding day. So I can take my time, but I'm basically just photographing all the little details. Might as well get extra shots of each thing while I'm here, while everything is put together and still. This just adds extra oomph to your gallery. These are the best for blogging. These are great social media posts. And if you're in a rush, at least you know you got a picture of everything, right? Okay, so at this point, everything that we need is on the table here for us. It's all laid out. So now what we need to do is start taking things apart so that we can individually photograph each thing. I have a system where I put things on the right side if they need to be photographed. And then as I photograph them, I put them into the middle of my set here. And then I move them to the left once they've been photographed. And that way I can always visually see what I still have to photograph. just keeps it a little bit more simple. So the first thing we're going to do is photograph the actual invitation suite. This is not necessary because we already photographed it in the flat lay. So if you were in a rush, this would not be a priority, but I like the look of doing this, and this is a really lovely invitation suite, so we might as well. So I'm just going to keep the most important aspects of this suite, which are the invitation and the envelope. And then I'm going to bring some of these flowers back in these little risers. And I'm just putting them here on the corner of the invitation so that they kind of frame the picture. We have a pink invitation or an envelope, and I don't want it to feel off balance, so I'm using the flowers to kind of frame it. And again, getting the full picture, but then I'm also getting little detail pictures while I'm here. I might as well. These are lovely, beautiful. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to move all of the invitations off to the side, and we're done with those. So now we need to start photographing her pieces. So let's start with the shoes. Shoes are super fun. Sometimes there are aspects of shoes that are not pretty, like if it's an open-toed shoe and you can see the prints of where her toes are. So maybe there's a way to downplay that. I always make sure that these clasps are done. In this case, this is a kind of funny pair of shoes and they're sticking out to the side. That's something I might end up photoshopping, like warping them in so that they look a little more consistent. But I always shoot directly above. That's a classic shot. I can shoot from this angle as well. In this case, I have stuff in the background, so I have to be careful about which angles I shoot from. Sometimes I put the heel on the other shoe. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it slides too much. But I think that's a pretty way to lift one shoe above the other. I always feature the most fun part of each shoe. And in this case, it's the sparkly toes, so I'm going to shoot that. And then you can also shoot from the side. And this is a fun one to shoot from the side because we have really cute heels. Yeah. And then we could add flowers back in. You can do this however you want with flowers, but if we have flowers, we might as well show them off because they're really feminine and they're lovely and the bride paid for them, that kind of thing. So we can just throw some flowers in and shoot them next to the shoes. Perfect. Okay, so the shoes are done and we're moving fast, right? Like you can spend as much time as you want on these, but I try to go really fast so that in case something comes up or the mother of the bride is like, oh wait, so-and-so just came, can you come shoot this instead? Because at any point on the wedding day, my time could just disappear. So I try to shoot as fast and efficiently, effectively as possible. Something to consider is that I typically encourage the bride to plan 45 minutes to an hour of getting ready photos. And I tell her to have all of the details there so that I can photograph, and especially because after getting ready pictures, all of those details are going to disperse throughout the entire wedding. You'll never get them all back together in the same place. So I like to have all of my details. I put it down on the hotel floor, I'm shooting stuff, and I'm kind of blending into the background while all the girls are getting ready. And that way they don't feel like I'm just hovering and like waiting to take their picture. And one of the reasons that I shoot with this lens, it's a 50 macro, which means it's a portrait lens, but I also can get really close without having to change many settings. So I love this because I can be here detail pictures, like really close-up pictures of the details. And then if they're laughing over there or they're having a great moment, I can run and take some pictures of the bride and groom and whoever else is in the room without having to switch a lens and things like that. And so I typically shoot my detail pictures while they're getting ready. Okay, so right here, I'm shooting the jewelry. So whatever that looks like, whether it's a ring or the earrings or whatever, I'm shooting that as a separate set. So that's really simple. I think this has the potential to be very high-end feeling. If I had the veil, this would be really lovely to put the veil in the background, but I don't. So I'm just going to get some details of it against the backdrop. Very simple, really pretty. Something I could do is take the back of the invitation and put the jewelry on top of the invitation. I've done this many, many times because the invitation is white, right? So it just keeps it really simple, really clean looking, totally up to your style. I do love this envelope, so I'm going to bring that back. There's a dark side of the envelope and a lighter side of where the pattern is showing, and so I'm going to feature the lighter side just because that matches the rest of what I'm shooting. So I'm doing this just to show you different options. You don't have to get every single version of what I'm shooting. I also love this shot. I'm going to put the earrings on this tray that I had the rings on earlier. I've done this with ring boxes before, and that's pretty too. But basically it's almost like like bringing jewelry on a silver platter. It must be fancy, it must be expensive, it must be important if we're framing it like that. So there we go. Okay, we got all that. Now, when it comes to the rings, I have a whole little mini course about shooting rings and what that looks like and the different poses I use. In this case, these are my rings, and so I don't have my husband's wedding band with me right now. So I have my engagement ring and then my 2 wedding bands. If I had a men's band, typically those are taller, and so I can fit my own ring or an engagement ring into it and kind of stand it up so that the diamond is towards, like straight towards the camera. In this case, I can't do that because my rings are all the same size and just the physics and the spacing of it doesn't work. So instead, I'm using the little ceramic bowl as the emphasis, and I have surrounded it with all the flowers. This is kind of an extra shot. This is totally unnecessary, but I have all the flowers. It's so pretty, and we might as well. Something to keep in mind when it comes to flowers, a lot of the times flowers have a dark spot, whether that's the shadows in between the petals or the actual center. But it's important to make sure that the light is hitting the flowers correctly. So I always turn the flowers towards the light instead of away, because if we turn it away, we're just going to get a dark hole with not the correct coloring. Like the shadow is going to make that pink in the flower really, really hot pink, like a darker kind of muddied color. And then it just adds unnecessary shadows to the picture. So we're going to move that. And I'm not going to do all of the poses that I do with all the rings here, but there are a few things that we could do. One of the things I love is putting the invitation suite here and putting the rings on the invitation suite. I try to get a lot of variety here, so sometimes I put it in front of their names so that if their names are like barely in the corner of the picture and in focus, you can see their names. Sometimes I do that with their date that is written out on the invitation suite. So you could put the flowers here in the background so that when they show up in the back of the picture, there's like wedding colors, and I think that's sometimes really lovely. Sometimes though, it just creates a dark shadow in the back. Sometimes though, it just creates a dark shadow in the back of the picture. So it might be worth getting rid of these and just shooting on the white. That's clean and bright and high end. And again, this is not the only way to shoot the flat lay, but this is how I do it. So I take everything from one side and move it this way. I shoot as fast as I can. I have it down to a science so that I can get as many pictures, as much variety as possible in the shortest amount of time, because you never know on a wedding day how much time you're actually going to have. And then I'm going to put the ring right in the flowers and get a close kind of the glamour shot that I talk about in the ring course. And then that is probably where I'm going to end.